Hey YouTube, new patch out today, patch 23.6 with a ton of huge changes to Battlegrounds and the rest of Hearthstone, but we're going to talk about all the Battlegrounds changes right now in our first YouTube exclusive Pocky patch review. So the first change here that we should talk about are the general Battlegrounds updates. Darkmoon prizes are back. That's insane. We had a brief moment last year where they came back for a little bit in 25% of games, and that's going to happen again up until the next Battleground season. Darkmoon prizes will be in 25% of games, but some of the changes, some of the prizes have changed since we last saw them. The number of copies of each tier 1 minion was reduced from 16 to 15. That means it's equal with the number of tier 2 minions in the pool. So there will be less tier 1 minions. It's going to make it harder to triple some of those tier 1 minions, which is kind of a cool change, I think. There's still going to be plenty of them to go around, but it'll make it a little bit harder. And we have a few more tier 1 minions now anyways, so you're not going to notice fewer tier 1 minions in the shops or something like that anymore. Battlegrounds perks are getting reworked. That is pretty crazy. We haven't seen reworks to the perk system, I want to say, since maybe 2019 even, when you originally had to buy packs to unlock perks and unlock the bonuses. That was a long time ago. But now the Discover from 4 Heroes, the Hero Early Access, and the Advanced Stats are actually going to last longer until the next Battleground season instead of the standard expansion. So for a while, we sort of had a cadence where perks would only last till the next expansion, but it didn't line up with the Battleground seasons, which sort of had more drastic changes to the Battlegrounds meta, new tribes, things like that. And that did cause a lot of confusion for players. So I think that's a great change. And hopefully they keep Battleground seasons and perks lined up so that confusion is reduced. And then emotes are gonna remain until the next standard expansion, and then everyone is gonna be able to use them. I'm pretty curious if maybe we'll see custom emotes or emotes, you know, as a cosmetic to be unlocked in the future, but they say there's more details and changes coming to perks and rewards before the next Battleground season. Maybe we're going to get an exclusive Battlegrounds Battle Pass. I know that's been sort of thrown around as a rumor for a while, and so maybe that's going to come to fruition. Anyways, that's it for the general Battlegrounds updates. Let's get into the more major gameplay updates that are going to impact the meta. We've got the new hero, Lady Vaj, armor tier 1, so not too much armor, and that makes sense because she is very strong. Relics of the Deep is a 1 gold hero power. Discover a spellcraft spell of your tier or lower. Passive, your first one each turn is permanent. That's a really, really big change because that means that does mean any minion can basically behave like a lava lurker, including minions that already have shield, that may have something like cleave, and you're going to be able to make that permanently buffed. You can start to look for glow scales once you get to tier 5 and sort of become a pseudo George. You can buff stuff up very early, and with only 3 spellcraft spells on tier 3 or lower, as long as you're on tier 3, you're guaranteed the Shoal Commander spellcraft, which can be pretty significant buffs when you're talking about 1 being permanent every turn for the cost of only 1 gold. This is a pretty strong hero power. I don't think it's going to be broken, but I think it will be very, very good and a very strong hero. So keep an eye out for Lady Vaj. She is much, much better than you may have remembered her if you did play a few years ago on her first iteration. That wasn't too good. We do have some other hero updates. Mr. Bigglesworth's hero power will now give a consolation coin whenever a player dies with no minions. This isn't a huge change. You know, it's still gonna work as you expect, but you won't end up getting sort of griefed if there's a ghost or someone that leaves early and you kind of miss out on that hero power and there's not really much you can do about it. It just kind of equalizes that. And so this is a great change. I think this is the kind of changes that we should see in Battlegrounds for heroes that are underperforming, things that will just help make them feel a little bit better, perform a little bit more consistently without having certain things in your control. Cariel Rome is updated now. Each of her hero powers was upgraded at their rank. So now Conviction on the first rank will buff 2 random friendly minions. On rank 2, it'll buff 4 random friendly minions. And at rank 3, it's not going to buff 6, but actually all friendly minions. So it's a lot more stats, and it will be a lot more viable to maybe run this at a reform curve and just pick up those stats to allow you to have some early game tempo, especially with some of the other things that we're going to see in the patch later. So keep an eye on Cariel for being, quite a bit stronger. Char has been reworked just slightly, and this is, again, a great consideration when changing some of these weaker heroes and making it more flexible and more sort of player friendly. So the old hero power was choose a friendly minion. It copies the attack of your highest attack minion until next turn. New is choose a minion. It copies the attack of the highest attack minion until next turn. That means that you can use it on minions in the shop, things like magnetic or things that we might see being swapped. Thoughts on that later. And we should mention the dev comments here. Wow, there's been a few in this patch notes, and I'm a huge fan. We've been asking for this for a long time, so huge shout out to the devs for taking the time to actually provide these comments and provide a little insight into these changes that otherwise might have left some people confused. And so that's a great initiative that I hope continues in the future. Guff is getting a small rework, going down or up in Tavern tier, depending on how you think of it, getting less armor. But that hero power is getting a buff, but it will be more expensive. So the old hero power was 1 gold, give a friendly minion of each Tavern tier plus 1/1. Now it's 2 gold, but the buff is 3/2. So a very hefty buff, but at a higher price. So the question is, how will you be able to weave this into your curve? And what curve do you even go for in the early game before you start using the hero power to acquire those minions of different Tavern tiers so you can maximize the tempo and the stats that you're getting from Guff's hero power? That one will be interesting. It's been a while since we've seen Guff at the top tier of play. It was maybe one of the worst heroes in the game for a while. And so, it's okay to take a shot. And if this isn't that good, it's not that much of a downgrade. And if it is very strong, then Guff can have another time to shine. Overlord Saurfang gets a pretty interesting change. The text isn't really changing too much, but you might notice that the phrase "this turn" is no longer there. That's because the effect now carries over between turns. You might see it on that dev comment there. That means you're going to be able to hold. You won't have those awkward turns where you need to sort of wait, or you can't get that minion that you're hoping to get. You can hero power, freeze, and buff something the next turn. Potentially buff something twice. I don't know if it works like that or not, but I'm sure there will be some clarifications on that soon. But a nice quality of life change to Saurfang, and these quality of life changes are super, super nice, and they're the kind of changes that we need to some of the less prominent heroes in the game right now. Sindragosa's old hero power was freeze a minion in Bob's Tavern. Frozen minions get +2/1 each turn. You might look at this hero power and say, how's it different? It's not. It's just worded a little bit different to clarify how the hero power works, so you don't think that you won't get your +2/+1 buff if you don't use your hero power. You can use the full shot freeze and all the minions will get buffed. So that's still going to work the same. It's just a little bit clearer how it works now. Makes it consistent with Lady Vaj with an active and a passive hero power. Sneed. Sneed's getting a pretty major rework, going down to armor tier 1. So a huge shift there from armor tier 7 to armor tier 1. The old hero power was 2 gold, give a friendly minion death rattle, summon a random minion of the same tavern tier. The new one is 1 gold, give a friendly minion death rattle, summon a random minion of a lower tavern tier. I believe it's just the tier below, so it's still controlled, but the change from 2 gold to 1 gold is very, very significant. It makes it much easier to weave in the early turns, and it will be very strong tempo still, and allow you to win a lot of those early and mid game fights, and provide some backup in those late game fights, and oftentimes it's enough to tip the scales in your favor. So this is a very, very interesting change for Sneed, and I expect to see a big jump in Sneed's average placements. Vandar also got a similar change. We went over direct touch change. Vandar is the same, except with the focus being health rather than attack. So that's going to be really fun, especially with some of the new minions that are going to see introduced. Your Sarge is also getting a slight change, and this one is maybe hard to recognize. So now you won't necessarily need an open board space to add the minion to your hand. If you want it summoned on your board, you still will need that board space. But if you have 2 gold at the end of your turn, but you want to keep 7 minions on your board, the same 7 minions, now you can still hero power and you will still get that minion to your hand. It just won't be summoned during combat. And that's it for the hero changes. For the minion changes, this is very, very significant. We have a lot of changes here. We have a brand new Tavern tier minion, Tavern Tipper. 2 attack, 2 health. If you have any unspent gold at the end of your turn, gain +1/+2. Now, that is actually a decent amount of growth. However, that cost to not spend all of your gold is very significant, and I don't think it's going to be worth it to generally pick up only 1. But if you pick up 2 early on, it might be worth it to play something like a Reform Curve where you're naturally floating a gold if you don't have a hero power worth, using that 1 gold to sort of scale up these Tavern Tippers. Now, it isn't a tribed minion, so it will be harder to make use of that in the late game, but it could provide very, very strong tempo in the early game, making it very hard for you to lose with the raw stats provided by Tavern Tipper. Silverback Patriarch is an interesting addition. It's a vanilla taunt. It's a 1 for beast, but it's a little... Well, I guess the big thing here is, we'll spoiler a little bit. Acolyte of Cthulhu is removed from the game. So Silverback Patriarch does provide that low tier taunt, low attack, which is helpful in playing around things, playing around Nadina or certain death rattles as a taunt. And should you need to, you still have the ability to reborn it as it is a beast, but it will take a investment that, is somewhat significant through a reanimating rattler. So something to keep your eye on as a potential tech. It does provide beasts now with a natural taunt. If you're running a Macaw, Goldrin type build, there's no death rattle, and it can be useful in that way, especially if you do put that reborn on it. So a nice change there, helpful to some of beasts comps with Mama Bear or Goldrin, like I mentioned, but mostly going to be available as a low attack taunt as a tech option. On Tavern Tier 2, we also have Sparring Partner. 3 attack, 2 health, has taunt, and the Battle Cry, give a minion taunt. While you might say, what is the purpose of this with Argus in the game? Well, Argus isn't in the game anymore. This is our new generic taunting minion, and it's a big change. Now in Tavern Tier 2, it's going to open up a lot of lines. It's going to make it more consistent to be able to protect certain minions early on, and there's more in the pool, so it will be easier to find, as well as being able to notably get it on Tier 3 instead of having to go to Tier 4, which will benefit Gem Splitter comps, arm comps especially, and things of that nature. And that also comes into play with Kooky Chemist. This is perhaps the strongest card in the set. It is insane. It might not look like it. It's just swapping the attack and health of a minion, but there are a lot of heroes that can make very strong use of this, especially in conjunction with Chroma Wing that can massively gain attack, or even something to a more minor degree, something like Arm that we now have the access to earlier in terms of getting those attack buffs, but not having the ability to buff health as often. Now you'll be able to do that with Kooky Chemist by simply swapping those stats. If you are looking for a card that is probably the most likely to get changed very early on in short order, it is probably Kooky Chemist. I wouldn't be surprised to see this move up tiers. It is an interesting tech option, but having access to it early on is probably not healthy for the game right now. If you go watch any Twitch stream, I'm sure in the next few days you will see some rampant abuse of the Kooky Chemist mechanic of swapping the attack and health of a minion. It's really hard to balance around because most minions are balanced around the fact that they're easy to buff health, they're easy to buff attack. Having the ability to change those stats can throw things out of whack very easily. Urel is an interesting addition to the game, another Tavern 2 minion. 1 attack, 5 health. After this attacks, give a friendly minion of each type plus 1/2. Well, okay, so it's a menagerie unit, sort of generic tempo on 2. This is actually replacing Menagerie Mug. I'm not sure how I feel about this change. I don't love units that need to attack because it adds a bit of RNG into your combats, which I don't love, and it's a very strong buff, and I'm not sure if that's necessary that early in the game. It's going to make fights very swingy, but with the change to Menagerie Mug being gone, there will be a slight nerf to Bran, a slight nerf to Caligos with less battle cries available, and a buff usually to Witchwing Nest Matron, whose pool of battle cries to provide is now reduced. So something to think about, but I am not a huge fan of Urel, but I could be wrong. We'll see. Maybe you find a way to make it good in the early game and transition it to the late game, or maybe it is just too strong in something that you really do lean into in the early game, depending on how the meta pieces out. On Tavern Tier 4, Atramedes, 3 attack, 6 health. Whenever this attacks, deal 3 damage to the target and its neighbors. Well, you might ask, isn't that a little bit redundant with Predator's Pyrospon? Yes, it is. Predator's Pyrospon has finally been removed, much to the rejoice of mech fans and Divine Shield fans everywhere. It was a little bit too strong with its ability to be teched with amalgams, dragons in general being able to pop small things, Leroy's, Divine Shields before they're attacked into. I think people will be very happy about the change. Atramedes itself still does provide dragons the ability to have a little bit of that Divine Shield counter, but you're going to need to buff this unit up itself now, and you don't get the attack multiple times, albeit it does have a bit of a pseudo cleave effect with that 3 damage to help it clear multiple sides, but it won't be as perhaps toxic as Predator's Pyrospon proved to be. It's also a bit stronger tempo on Tier 4 as well. in the early game, which is actually very good for dragons. I don't know how often you'll pick this up, but if you do happen to triple into a 4, there will be more times that this is the best tempo, and that is an interesting consideration. Also in Tavern Tier 4, we have the addition of Wargear, a new magnetic 5/5 body. You may remember this card from Standard. Very simple card. It's pretty cool. This is also a slight nerf to Bran, as Clunker has been removed, and this will be replacing it as a buff. It is a higher Tavern tier with more stats, but it's magnetic, meaning you won't get buffs from battle credits being doubled. It does sort of lower the pool of tier 3 units, which is better for heroes that go 3-on-3 or a hero like AFK. The other thing, speaking of pool, is that magnetics don't return back to the pool after you play the buff. Wargear will still be on the unit, and so as more and more Wargears are accumulated onto different boards, there will be less in the pool, rather than something like Clunker that gets cycled through and returned to the pool generally pretty quickly. Tunnel Blaster, Tavern Tier 4, 3 attack, 7 health, taunt, death rattle, deal 3 damage to all minions. This is a Google replacement. You got it. I think this is a great change. There's a few things here to sort of break down. The 3 damage to all minions is a much stronger tempo choice in the mid game than Ghoul was, so it won't feel as bad to hit. It won't feel great, that's for sure. It's also harder to have it die consistently with 7 health or play around certain things with 3 attack, but it does more effectively counter something like Leroy than Ghoul does, and that is a good thing in my opinion, because Leroy was a bit too strong in the current meta. Now, of course, Leroy should be strong, as right now we're going to need to deal with some of the Kooky Chemist shenanigans, but otherwise I think this is a good change, and it's a nice change of pace with Argus and Ghoul sort of changing roles as a tier 2 and a tier 4 tech option, and it should be a little bit less frustrating to face those overall, or find those overall, but it will be harder to find this tier 4 Tunnel Blaster as opposed to Ghoul on tier 2, because there will be fewer copies. And the last new minion addition is a new Tavern Tier 6, 5 attack, 6 health Uther, the Lightbringer. Battlecry, set a minion's attack and health to 15. So a pretty interesting choice here. The golden version, of course, is set a minion's attack and health to 30, so it's unlikely that you golden this unit, but if it does happen, or you happen to get one off of Nosy Looter, that's a pretty significant stat change. The cool thing about this is you can use it on any minion. Of course, the ones that come to mind are units that are generally hard to buff, those tribeless units like Baron or Zap that oftentimes you do want to get a few stats on. Even Bran at times would be pretty nice because it makes it more relevant, makes it a little bit easier to keep it on that board. But you can also use this on magnetic units to act as a mech buff to any other mechs on your board, or early tempo where it is just strictly a buff on a unit's base stats. If you find an early Hydra or something that you happen to have on board, tripling into an Uther or finding an Uther on an early Tavern Tier 6 can be quite strong. I like this because it doesn't make direction on 6 overly present. It's still a feat to find, and you have to consider what minion types are in the game for what you're wanting to triple into, but it also does provide a tempo option if you don't hit. We obviously know some misses aren't immediate tempo, and if you are tripling into a 6 and do happen to miss on what you're looking for, Uther might be the answer that you're looking for, or maybe the second best. Also, minion pool updates that we're seeing. We talked about many of the minions getting removed, but there's a few that we didn't. And there were 2 new minions returning to the pool. So Shifter Xeris is returning to the pool. The beloved tier 3 mystery box, and Iron Sensei, the tier 3 automatic mech buff. So that is a bit of a replacement for the Screwjang Clunker, which is providing that buff, but it is a bit stronger for those 3-on-3 heroes or AFK because it's providing consistent scaling rather than that one-time buff that Clunker did. And Mechano Egg is also going to be out of the pool. You can make an argument that Wargear is replacing that on tier 4, but they do provide a little bit different options. However, Mechano Egg did have to be removed to prevent too many shenanigans with being able to kill your own units that had death rattles during the shop phase. I was hoping that maybe we would get to play around with that a little bit, but the devs were had enough foresight to prevent that from happening. So Mechano Egg will not be in the pool. You will be down a reset and a bit of that tier 4 tempo. The last minion that we see removed is Budding Green Thumb. That is what Shifter Xeris is replacing on tier 3. Budding Green Thumb was extremely strong, maybe a little bit underrated at lower MMRs, but very well used at higher MMRs to provide those buffs to different units. Uther now going to be able to do that as a generic buff to some of those neutral units in cases where you can't otherwise. But Green Thumb, yeah, makes Avenge just a little bit weaker and hits some of those buffs. It had its non-fans, but a lot of fans are going to be disappointed about the Budding Green Thumb removal. And then a few minor updates or some bigger updates to minions. Bannerbore is changing to a 1/3 in health. However, now you don't need to specifically have Quillbores for it to get that buff. It's now playing a blood gem on adjacent minions, so providing a minor replacement for that Budding Green Thumb effect of buffing adjacent minions regardless of what they are, but it won't be as strong and it won't be able to be multiple times per turn. But this is a fantastic change. Bannerbore was a little weak recently, not really holding up to the rest of the scaling in the game. And now with this flexibility, Bannerbore is going to be a very valuable minion to pick up for a while, with consistent 2/2 buffs as long as you have minions on both sides that you want to buff. Battlemaster is getting 2 more attack. It will play the same, but this is a nice update that brings it more in line with the current meta. There was a time when if you were at low health, Battlemaster was enough to stabilize you, but with 3 attack, with the amount of scaling in the game now, that often wasn't the case. 5 attack will help it sort of compete with other 5 drops and be a stronger unit in the right situation. So a great change there, nothing too fancy, but just bringing it in line with the current power level of Battlegrounds as we know it now. Soul Devour actually isn't getting a functional change here, but it brings it more in line with Fellbat and Urel through the consumption mechanic, consuming a friendly demon to gain its stats and +3 gold. And the final revised minion is Greasespot, actually moving to tier 6. Pretty crazy. It's getting a slight buff to its stats, going from a 3/6 to a 4/7. However, it now has Divine Shield on itself, so it will be able to scale itself. But any other friendly minions that lose Divine Shield now gain +3/2 permanently instead of +1/1. So another 1/1 to +3/2 buff. And this one is significant, warranting that tier 6 placement. This is going to be very strong. Things like Mecro will be more consistent, and you can play it with non-mechs as well, giving easy access to units like Bristleback Knight or Bronze Warden or Crackling Cyclone, or really anything you want if you do happen to find a glow scale to pair with it. So this is a pretty cool change. It will allow a lot more things to get buffed, but Divine Shields are going to be very, very strong, I feel, with some of the changes that we've seen in this patch. And as for our other changes, new and updated Darkmoon prizes, the good stuff is no longer giving +2 health, but rather +1 attack. So that'll be a bit of a shift. I don't think that it's particularly strong compared to some of the other turn 4 Darkmoon prizes, but that does remain to be seen. There are a lot of changes that, maybe this coincides with making it stronger than the health buff was. But overall, I think this is a slight nerf, but that's okay because the old good stuff was extremely strong with that +2 health, often being a must-take. I'm still just a rat in a cage. Now gives 2 attack before the attack doubling. This is a slight buff. Rat in the Cage was one of the worst turn 8 prizes because it is kind of hard to get a minion to a significant attack total by turn 8, whereas before, when it was doubled on turn 12, usually the minion you were doubling had time to build up a lot more attacking, so the actual buff was more significant. Now, by providing that +2 attack, it does sort of equalize it to some of the other stuff, and I would definitely keep your eye on this again with Kooky Chemist and some of those types of plays, because with an extra card, it becomes a big health buff in some situations, and that is sometimes hard to come across and sometimes extremely valuable. Great Deal's getting a slight rework, now discounting the cost to upgrade Bob's Tavern tier by 6 gold instead of 3 each turn. So this means it will be a more immediate boost to level quickly, and I like that change a lot. Oftentimes, Great Deal was restricted for heroes in situations where you kind of needed to stay on 4 for a while, but you still wanted to be able to level by the end of the game, and that was a little bit too niche. But now, by immediately discounting the cost by 6, the speed at which you get to that higher Tavern tier is super valuable, even if you might not get as much total value in terms of the gold discount. The cadence at which you level does matter significantly, and so I think this is a great change. The Bouncer, instead of giving +5/5 in taunt, now gives +6/6 in taunt, and again, this is just a bit of an update to bring it in line with what we experience in the Battlegrounds meta now. Stats and power creep has happened, and so the spell to compete gets a small buff. Bananas, Bananas, as Gwen Stefani taught us, now have a 50% chance to be a big banana. This lines up with Mookla's hero power. There's no change to the card text box, but now it is a consistent mechanic that whenever you're getting bananas, you have a 50% chance to get a big banana, and that will make Bananas a lot stronger, a lot more overall stats, and of course, it's worth keeping in mind that all these changes will also be a big ticketus change, so something to consider there. And lastly, Big Banana itself, the prize, has been removed from the Darkmoon Fair prize pool, and 2 new prizes have been added. The first being Banana Bunch, though this is a prize turn 1, turn 4. Add 2 bananas to your hand, and these can also have that 50% chance to be a big banana. So just exclusively better than Big Banana, and giving you the option to, even if you don't end up hitting a big banana, split boss, which can be good in the early game. That flexibility is something that I thought should have been changed a while ago. Big Banana just, being a prize that could give you 2 bananas. It's just exclusively better and keeps it more in line with the power level of the other prizes. And that is a good thing, because sometimes you want some pros and cons, and the flexibility of being able to direct your bananas is great, but it wasn't as good as something like, buffing 3 minions 1/1. Now you have the chance to have those stats, but you will be able to control them, which is the more important part. And prize turn 3, so this is turn 12. There's a new prize, Mind Flayer Goggles. Steal all minions in Bob's Tavern, then refresh it. This does line up with the effect that we saw on Yogg's Buddy during Buddy meta, and allowing you to steal Bob's Tavern which was a fun mechanic. If you did come across a very good shop, you know, you would drop the steal, and maybe that will be the case here. Maybe you will hold it and roll a little bit for that great shop. But it's a fun change, and a potentially very big power spike. And the last change to the Battlegrounds updates are the players in the bottom half of the scoreboard are no longer more likely to get better prizes. That was something that was added in the second rendition of prizes to add a bit of a comeback mechanic to Battlegrounds, and that's been removed. So that's good, because I didn't really like the mechanic because it prevented you from getting certain spells if the game determined that you're in the bottom half of the scoreboard, even if maybe you weren't looking to be limited to the number of spells that you could get. And so I think that's a good change, and it's also less confusing for players to understand, so great change overall there. Of course, we have a few other updates to Mercenaries and Arena if you're interested in that. Fire Festival will be coming back starting on June 30th. The new expansion was announced, and the big thing here, well, a few things. Fixed a bug where glow scale spellcraft temporary divine shield could remove a minion's permanent divine shield. I actually had a bug report on this, and I believe that I had a part in this bug fix. So congrats to me for experiencing that bug, but glad to see it fixed. And the big thing is miscellaneous other performance improvements, text updates, and bug fixes. Performance improvements being the most notable. If you've played recently, you may remember that the lag has been very bad. All reports are that the lag is gone, and that is cause to rejoice. We're very excited about that. So huge shout out to the team for finally getting that sorted, because the game is just more fun to play when you can play. Overall, I think this is a really, really great patch, actually. Do I think the balance will be perfect? Absolutely not. But I love the approach to the game and to the sort of theory of the game that this is telling me they're taking, right? Moving small changes, right? Small changes that are just quality of life. It will feel better. Bannerbore was a little weak. A slight change. This is going to make it much better, much nicer. Yes, you remove green thumb, but you replace it with something that's more consistent, but maybe less powerful. And you buff Bannerbore at the same time. Great change, right? Battlemaster just comes in line with where it should be. Soul Devourer, this is a great change. This is a fantastic change. Changing text to make it consistent, I'm all for it. Let's go. Greasespot is a great rework. It was a little bit weak on tier 4 with only giving +1/1 permanently. It kind of overlapped with Gem Splitter, which was almost exclusively better, and a tier 3 unit. And some of these new units are very interesting. The approach to Tunnel Blaster and the Argus change. You know, it's going to be harder to taunt multiple things with Sparring Partner, but you have access to it earlier. You can take advantage of Arm easier. You're flipping things. The solution of Tunnel Blaster to be able to sort of provide a pseudo nerf to Leroy is fantastic. Leroy was way too strong. We've talked about some of the stats with Leroy and Manted Queen. Great change for Tunnel Blaster, even if there will need to be some tunings to these units. Wargear and the removal of Mug, slightly nerfing Bran in some of those units. Preemptively removing Egg, I guess, is a good change, although I can't say I'm behind it. Like I said, Kooky Chemist, I think, is going to be prone to creating some very broken mechanics, so I would look to see this change quickly. Maybe move it to like Tavern tier 4, where it's an interesting tech that you would pick up sometimes, like Reanimating Rattler, but not something that's going to be as likely to break the game. There's fewer in the pool. Probably a good change. I think this is just a very abusable unit because of the unique mechanic to swap attack and health, which are mean, the game is really balanced a lot around certain minions have high attacks, certain minions have low health, or vice versa. And this can just turn that on its head, especially with chromoing. And so, yeah, I think this is a prime candidate for a nerf or a change. The replacement of Acolyte, I think, is fantastic. Acolyte did a lot of damage at times. It was a bit strong and a bit swingy. It was a very good unit, but you can still kind of build your own Acolyte with a reanimating Rattler. But now, Beast with that extra taunt, it's easier to make some of your Death Rattle builds more consistent, especially if you do reborn the Silverback Patriarch, the Goldrin stuff. But it can also act as sort of that extra Acolyte as a block to, you know, Exodia, Pirates, or a Nadina, or even just Wind Fury or Cleave and you want some extra taunts. I really like that ability to, you know, have it work that way, or just have it on its own and not be quite as strong as Acolyte was. One big thing is the lower attack. Will mean that it won't be able to immediately kill a Leroy, and the reborn won't kill a Leroy. So cool changes here overall. Tavern Tipper I'm not super on board with. The hero changes are great. Quality of life changes as well. Minor changes that are unlikely to break the game, although I think a few of these are quite strong. Sneed, Cariel I think will be quite strong. Vandar and Drektar will be significantly stronger with Kooky Chemist being in the game, and some of the shenanigans that you can make happen that way. So they, despite being very bad for most of their lifetime in the game, will have their time to enjoy the spotlight. And Lady Vaj is back, and I'm excited to play her. And the rest of the changes in Battlegrounds, I think this is one of the best changes that we've had in Battlegrounds in terms of the approach and really showing how the devs are going to tackle this game in an ongoing way with some of these smaller changes. And if balance takes a little bit to get there, if we need some tweaks, that's fine. That is a-okay. This is the stuff I love to see. And a huge shout out to all the dev notes. I love that. More. I want more of that. That is the communication and stuff that the players are looking for to understand how some of these changes are working that can be confusing, or just insights on why changes are being made. It's fantastic. So hopefully we see more of that. And yeah, this took way longer than expected. I thought this was gonna be short, but we're going on 45 minutes. I honestly thought I could do this in like 15 minutes, but I guess that's what you get with a Pocky patch review. I hope you guys enjoyed the content. If you do, please subscribe to the channel. It helps a ton. We're getting some good traction on YouTube, so keep coming back. The content's just gonna get better from here, I promise. And turn on the notification bell so you get to see our next video. And let me know what your thoughts on the patch are in the comments. Do you agree with my takes? Do you disagree? Do you think this is a bad patch? Let me know. Don't forget to tune into our Twitch channel, twitch.tv/PockyPlays, or follow us on any of our other socials. Most of the links will be down in the description below. Thanks for watching, and as always, peace.